This is going to be fun, man. We're going to talk about all the companies that you've built and the differences between starting a company from scratch as opposed to buying a company and growing it, as opposed to getting into a franchise, which you've done very, very successfully. And we're also going to talk about some of the not so successful ventures from your past, because I think that the lessons from our mistakes are sometimes far more helpful in growing our next and our next and our next and our next business. And I've watched you build a mobile shredding company, a sleep clinic, a golf resort, and now you're growing 2 companies in the hospitality world, all in completely different industries. But there's a few things that are foundational that always trigger growth in any industry, in any economy, in any revenue level. And that's one of the reasons why I think this is going to be so much fun, because I want to kind of pick your brain on what those things are for you. And I want to go over the other things that you and I were talking about a couple of days ago, which almost always kill a business or stop them in their tracks sometimes. And that's entrepreneurial ADD, where the founder gets distracted if they're not careful, if they don't know what we're going to go over today. And I think I know your solution to that in your life, because you take a super strategic approach to numbers in your businesses. I mean, methodical. So it appears like you have entrepreneurial ADD from the outside. If somebody didn't know you, they'd be like, God, he's all over the place, because you built companies in vastly different industries. But everything I've ever seen you do is a numbers game. So can we start first by talking about that and what your view is on tracking numbers in business?
Yeah, Chris, it's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this, and I don't have any magic formulas as it relates to numbers, but one of my philosophies is to Fisher Price thing. So keeping it simple, and kind of the way I do that is it's name it, label it, chart it, graph it, color code it. Anything that you can do to have somebody look at a chart of numbers as an example and not run in the other direction. So most people don't think, or many people don't think in terms of spreadsheets or financial analysis. I'm by no means the financial analysis genius in any way, but it's usually where I start. So, in the end of the day, I think as it relates to this, it's that there's a real opportunity in looking at the numbers and having an understanding of what's possible in the beginning of any business. And I think because of my financial consulting background, it made me very comfortable starting with the numbers as it related to any business opportunity that I looked at.
Yeah. So I gotta go back to something that you said, because you've said this to me in past meetings, and it changed the game in how we run things in several of my companies. You said it very eloquently just now, but very, very fast. Like you said, we Fisher Price it. And then you listed what you think Fisher Price really means. For us, the part that I really grabbed hold of when you initially introduced that to me a long time ago was color coding things. Like, we make things, all of our operating systems, all of our frameworks, we make them so simple that if somebody comes in who doesn't know anything about our culture, doesn't know anything about how we do things, but they have a skill set in that particular department, and they pick up our operating procedure, they're able to understand it fluently. And it's the same template that we use for every other SOP or framework inside of our companies, so that when people move around, they're seeing the same framework. So go back, if you don't mind, tell us what the steps are in your mind for Fisher pricing things, and then go deeper.
Yeah, it's kind of just a little laundry list of ways that you can make things very simple, right? So it's name it, label it, chart it, graph it, color code it. I'm a big fan of color coding too. And I'll give you a story back in my financial consulting days that was sort of one of the things that was the ingredients of me kind of coming up with that later in businesses. So with financial consulting, so we did estate and business continuity planning, and we built a nice business doing that. We did seminars that we would go out and educate people about the tax law and all these different things. And then they would come into our office, and we kind of had it set up where it was almost like a doctor office. We'd be walking to the office, we'd have the information from the seminar, basically walk in and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, how are you? And that's how the relationship began. But ultimately, we would be presenting the issues, the solutions, and all of that. And so as we got further in our career, and back then we used flip charts, right? Like, the financial world there are a bunch of intangible things, wills, trusts, and you had to write it on a piece of paper and make it tangible. So certain things were a square, certain things were a triangle, all of these things, and you would flow chart it out so people could understand an 80-page trust document, and they could see it in a few squares in a flow chart and have them go, that's what that is? And they're like, yes. That's what that does? Yeah. Okay. And that was our role in helping them do that. So the joke is they're like, look, if a new guy comes in, that flip chart needs to have everything laid out from the beginning to the end of the presentation. So if the presenter has a heart attack during the presentation, the client can get up, continue to flip the pages and buy. Right? So that's the most extreme example of Fisher pricing it, where as somebody looks at it, it becomes intuitive.
Yeah, that's an extreme analogy and absolutely amazing. I remember
part of the story. I used to say they could step over the body to get to the flow chart, but I've taken that out.
Listen, everything in life, when you're learning it, I forget where I learned this, but I think I learned it a long, long time ago when I was in college. I didn't do well my first year of college, like really bad. And I was a smart kid, but I was introduced to partying for the first time in my life in my freshman year of college. So I did not do well.
That's the confession section of the presentation.
The meeting. Yes, this is, the dark side of Chris. So my parents went out there and bought me a program on how to study, and it was called Where There's a Will, There's an A. And I don't remember a lot of it, but there's a couple of pieces in it that stuck with me forever and changed a lot of how I've done things in business as well as in my personal life. One of those things is basically what you just said, which is when you want to remember something, or when you're teaching it to somebody on your team and you want them to remember it, you make it as graphic and gory as possible. And just that visual ingrains it in somebody's mind. So we laugh at this and it's hysterical the way you put it, right? If the guy presenting it has a heart attack and dies, you got to step over the body, right? And still be able to go through that flip chart. And that flip chart's got to be so Fisher priced, so easy to understand that client could understand it perfectly, and still you could make that sale. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, and it's that theme has kind of weaved its way through all of my the structural part of my business.
Yeah. So one of the things that I talk about all the time in business is I will do more to become clear on everything than I will anything else. I'll spend 80% of my time, sometimes even 90% of my time, getting clear. That way, everybody on the team is aimed and they all know the exact direction that we have to go, the exact actions they need to take, everything, which is what you're talking about. Fisher pricing it makes it so that everybody understands it. Because I think the biggest challenge we've ever had, anytime we've ever plateaued in our growth in any of our companies, it's always because there's one person on the team who didn't get it, doesn't understand what they need to do, and they're afraid to ask about it because they don't want to seem stupid. So what you're talking about, making things Fisher priced, I think fixes the great majority of that.
Yeah, I think it also applies to client facing. And, because we've got, in this particular business, we have rep groups in different parts of the country. And so they don't just represent our textile, they represent other product lines that sell to the hotels. And so we've got a value proposition to them as to how they can make money by working with us, but we're subcontracting our sales effort out for that, along with their speaking about other product lines as well. So I've got an interesting dynamic where I can provide all the back of house value, but I need to then Fisher price that presentation so that they can take our message and then deliver that to the client in the way that we do. And, my business partner and I, we deliver sales presentations all over the country all the time, and we're methodical about it. We always hit on all of our value propositions and our company differentiators. But we do it the same way, and it's consistent, but our reps always don't do that. And that's actually a challenge before us right now, to figure out how to script that and do it in a fashion and Fisher price that so that they can go ahead and deliver that successfully when we're not there. But I think it applies in every direction of a business, regardless of who you're dealing with.
One thing we didn't do is we didn't talk about your businesses. And you just mentioned one of them, the one that you're working on growing right now, which is Optimum Textiles. Give us a 30,000 foot view really quickly of that, so that when we do reference it, everybody knows basically what this company does.
Yeah. So and we can get into the how I got into it later, which is everybody asks, how the hell did you get into that? And it doesn't matter whatever business I've done. And so, we're a fabric manufacturer and supplier to the hotel industry. And we could do it in other industries and all that, but it's really hospitality, but of hospitality, restaurants and hotels. We really focus on hotels. So if you walk into a hotel room, anything you see that has a piece of fabric on it, whether it's the furniture, upholstery, or the drapery sheer, blackout fabrics, headboard fabrics, anything that has fabric on it, we can supply that fabric and we manufacture it. We ship it to the fabricators who make it into whatever that piece of furniture is in rolls. And that's where we're done. So we are very specialized, very specific, but we are focused on high volume guest rooms and high volume guest room fabrics. And as a result, we have the ability to provide really great quality, faster, and more cost effectively, which is huge in the hotel industry.
Yeah, I don't understand how you went. Was that after the golf resort, or
Yeah?
Give me the progression, at least right before that, because I've known you for over 20 years and you never expressed any interest, at least in our meetings, about textiles. How did you get into this?
Well, it's funny you say it that way because like I've got, kids who graduate from college. I've got nieces and nephews that are just graduating, and I get a lot of call. Oh, come on, what should I do? And there's this whole conversation about what you want to do. And my first reaction on all this stuff is you can focus on what you don't want to do as much as what you want to do. And you don't know, right? So I never knew what I wanted to do. When I finally got into financial consulting early on, I fell in love with it. I was reading the brochure. I was like, I want to do this, right? And it was passion. And then during the latter years of my financial consultant, because I was working with a lot of business owners, and he got to like, man, this guy built a really good business, and he's not magical. He's like a regular guy, and he clearly worked hard and did some things right, but he's built a nice company. And so at that point, I'm like, I really think I want to be like an entrepreneur and have my own business. And I actually at one point said I wanted to have something with trucks. Ideally, we can't even tell you why. And then that's how I stumbled across Shred-it, and I ended up making the switch and doing Shred-it. But when I went up there to investigate the business, I've been investigating businesses for years, and nothing really hit me. And when I went up, and that was a franchise, and it was headquartered out of Toronto. And when I went up there, and I'm like, oh, I'm doing this. I mean, I just knew it. And it ironically had trucks. And I had that thought about trucks years before. And then here, this business presents itself, and it was a no-brainer for me. And I left a successful financial planning business that I could have been in the whole rest of it. I would be better to be in that business now with 30 some years of experience with some gray hair and all that than I was at 29 years old. But I made the switch, and I knew that one. In every business thereafter, I had no idea that I was going to like it because my formula changed. It was more about finding some kind of a niche business or a business that I could become niche within. So I'm not even sure if I answered your question.
Yeah.
It was never about, in the beginning, it was about, I found something that I really got excited about. And after that, after you sell a company or you start to look at things maybe a little differently to your advantage and to your disadvantage. And we'll talk more about that as we chat, but it becomes more about the opportunity and less about, being so excited about it. And that's what I try to tell people. Don't be so worried about what it is, because as you get down the road and you learn about whatever it is you decide to do, as you learn more about that, it will give you insight, and you'll be able to see things about some other next thing that you might want to do that you never would have been able to see, months or years prior to that.
Yeah. So I remember when I sold my first real company, my first company that actually had employees and was relatively large. When I was going through the process of trying to figure out what's the next step, should I sell? Should I take on investors? I literally felt like I was looking into a closet that had no light on inside of it. It was black. I just couldn't see what was beyond that door. If I got out of this industry, which I was in for over a decade, what would I do? Like, what would be my next step? I just didn't know. And it was scary. And the difference between the path that you took and the path that I took is that everything that I did, there was some synergistic fragments in my past company to my next company. And often there was an overlap where I started the next company while I was selling or moving on from the last company. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs and founders, they sometimes stay in the relationship longer than they should. They sometimes keep the business just because they don't know what they would ever do next. And that's to the detriment of the business, to the detriment of the employees, to the detriment of everything. So speak about that in your own life, because you jump from a completely different industry to a different industry looking for the opportunities, the niches, as opposed to what do I have a core competency in?
Yeah, I mean, that the joke in how I explain it, like when people ask, well, what have you done? Like, tell me about it. And I was at a symposium in the city, 15 years ago or so, and maybe 10, 15. And it was a big financial thing. I was the least knowledgeable, least wealthy guy there. And they're all going around the room and they're all talking about themselves, Wall Street cuts and all these guys. And I get to myself and and I'm like, I was a financial consultant for 10 years. And they're all like, oh, that's financial. I should be here. And then and then I made the very logical conclusion to the on-site mobile paper shredding business. And they're like, they all start laughing. And then from there, of course, what makes perfect sense. And you would step right into the sleep diagnostic clinic. And of course the golf resort. And I'm like, so as I get done with it, it's like it's like somebody shot a shotgun of ink, and every shot hits the wall and none of the same color, right? And so that's where this entrepreneurial ADD came from, and that's how I explained it. I went for all these different industries, and it's because I have entrepreneurial ADD. Now that's my joke in it, and there's just probably more truth in that than I want to admit. But it really just comes down to the fact that it was the next thing that came up that really made a lot of sense for me. And the golf resort was not. It was sometimes you don't make very good decisions. Right? I didn't have all the information. I had enough money to throw at it, and I was like, yeah, if I lose this, it's not that really big a deal. And I got in, and that was my story from the lesson from the edge, which we'll talk about when you want to. But there wasn't a connection on the surface. But as you and I have talked about, I got this belief that 80% of all businesses are exactly the same. The chassis of the business and how they have to operate. And the only difference is whether you're selling a product or a service, and then that product knowledge. And so that it didn't make me feel uncomfortable at all about moving into an industry I didn't know much about. And usually with each one that I went into, there was some kind of resident expert. And as I said, I had a scientist. I had a guy that knew the technical. And I'm like, as long as I got that guy, then the rest of it we can put around and take the 85%, wrap it around the technical, that piece of it, and then I can learn it. And then in the end of the day, you're going to have to sell it no matter what it is. You got to sell. And I knew I could bring that to the table. So it's my own convoluted formula, I guess you could say.
That brings us into my next question, because you've had, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've had a different partner in each of your entities. And I could be mistaken. There may be one or two that I don't know about, but most of your work has been with partners. Is that the resident expert that you're talking about? Or is it normally I'd like to own a golf resort, or I'd like to own a sleep center? And then you find somebody who has money that wants to invest in it, has core competencies that match or that complement yours, or is it another skill set?
That's a really good question. I don't think I really thought about it. So I've had partners in every business that I've done. The financial consulting, you get in that early on, you're trained in that industry. So you become the expert, but there was CPAs and attorneys on staff. And then we would build our own practice within that organization. And then that's how that became my first entrepreneurial experience. The shredding business was my high school buddy was also in financial consulting, and we would get together periodically and, get together for dinner and solve the problems of the world. One of which was talking about, hey, what do we really want to do? And so we did that together, but it was a franchise. So we got the technical expertise from the franchisor in that example. And then the business partner was a friend who had, complementary skill sets. Sleep Center, we found, and it was a licensing opportunity. So we licensed the tech, if you will, the know-how. And then we built out the center and then just grew it from there and sold. I can sell shredding services, which nobody really ever heard of when we started. I can sell sleep studies. And, so that was and that business partner was a friend who, he owned the building that we had our shredding business in, but became really close. So we just did that one. So, and I guess it's really more people, that I got to know and I trusted, and we liked working together. And then that's how most of them happened. That's how this one happened. The golf resort was different. It was people that I didn't know quite as well. I thought I think I knew them well enough. And then, everything thereafter was bad. It was good till it got bad. And then ultimately it got good in the end because we got out of it. But there were 8 business partners in that one. But in the end, 2 of them became like brothers, and I didn't know them at all getting in. And so, I feel I'm blessed in that, ultimately I'm blessed with the partners that I have and the people that I have gotten in business with. And, so that's kind of how it's happened. It's not like I said, hey, I wanted to go do this. Let me go and find all the ingredients to start it from scratch. It's just kind of the right person and the right opportunity came together at the right time.
We both talked about the golf resort a couple of times. So let's go deeper into that one. I think that particular business is a great case study I think we're really talking about 3 main things today. We're talking about entrepreneurial ADD, right? Going from industry to industry. We're talking about numbers, your ability to see things in numbers and the benefits that has, and partnerships. So, that has all of these wrapped up, as well as a couple of pretty crazy stories. So what attracted you to the resort first? And then we'll get into, the intricacies of how it went, the roller coaster, and then how it actually ended up pretty damn good.
Yeah, everybody likes this story or is always asking about it. So I was in the process of getting ready to sell my shredding company, and then some guys I knew through a close friend brought this opportunity to me. And I looked at it and listen, the main reason people will buy a golf resort because it would be just cool to own a golf resort. That's like, whatever it's like, that would be amazing, right? And the brochure was fantastic. The property was beautiful. So it was an emotional decision. And in that one, there was an 18-hole golf course and a clubhouse with some big banquet space, a full restaurant, a pro shop, and a packaging business. So that was the property. Oh, and it had 64 condo villas, 2-bedroom condo villas there. So we bought this thing, and the intention was to do real estate development and get it all master plan approved. It was, I don't know, 250, 300 acres, maybe more. I just don't remember. And so there was an infill team that was involved, 8 people. And there was some engineers, real estate guys, finance guy, a lawyer. So it was like a really kind of cool group of people. And so qualified. So my job was to do the operations of the golf course. So there was the golf course. There was a sales team that ran a packaging business. So we booked people to stay at the condos and then golf at our place and then golf at other golf courses in that area. So we would sell that. We'd have people eat at the restaurant. We would do weddings. We would do corporate functions there. It was like a lot of things. There were like 5 different businesses within this one business. And I was responsible for running all of those and restructuring and all of that. And then everybody else was focused on the real estate. And it was losing $1 million a year, the operational part. And I said, okay, when they raised the money, they brought in 60 investors. I said, just give me $1 million so I can have a runway to get this thing turned around. And then nobody cared. I kept saying, we'd be in the meetings. I'd be like, here's where we're on operation. They're like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And they all were sexed up over the real estate, and understandably so. And at the time, which I'll tell you was in July of 2006. So knowing what's headed around the corner in 2008, right? We just bought a golf resort, and now we're going to try to turn this thing around. So they did a nice job. They got everything master plan approved. Everything was great. They put improvements into the golf course. It was pretty cool until I started to need some money because we were doing good with the operations. And I said, okay, and they brought in, I think I said it, they're not, they brought in 60 investors and there was money into the things. I come to find out they ran out of money. as close as you can to come to zero, as close as you get to zero. And so it was not good. So long and short of it, there was a bunch of meetings with some of the investors, and there was lawsuits, and there was all this stuff that started to happen. And nothing was done immorally, illegally, and ethically with the money. It was completely mismanaged. And when you say I have an affinity for the numbers, I never really saw the projections, or I kind of looked at them at a high level. I'm like, well, there's two guys in there that are all over that. I don't need to get too deep into it. And an engineer involved in it too. So anyway, the shit hit the fan at that point. We had a meeting. There was a lot of yelling and screaming. And instead of just handling operations, I was voted to just take control of the whole thing and try to get everybody out of it successfully. So I started to dig into the numbers, which is a big lesson for me. There was never anything that I did after that I didn't start with the numbers. That may have been the thing that caused me to start with the numbers every time thereafter. But I started to look at it, and it's all about the assumptions. I always tell people, look, you can have the greatest business idea, and then you can put together a very comprehensive spreadsheet. I've done many, many since, and I'll build these spreadsheets, and we'll go into all of the expenses, all of the assumptions, and all those things. We really beat them up, and then I'll go to the person who's responsible. For one of my mentors said to me, "How are you going to put assets in the seats?" And I'm like, "Okay, good question." So now that's what I would do. It's like, okay, you're responsible for sales. How are we going to put assets in seats? And so that became, the thing, because people can make optimistic projections on revenue, and that fixes everything, right? But if they're not realistic, your financial model could be destroyed right there. When we play with all these, that's something I just have become, by probably collateral damage, good at. So in the end, it got very ugly. They were trying to convince me to develop certain parts of the property out and sell parts of it off. And I'm listening to everything, and I'm going back in with the engineers, two guys in the project that became like brothers. They're smart and they're honest. And we had a lawyer on board she was really helpful. And long and short of it, I kept listening to everybody, the realtor down there, and I'll listen. Finally, I'm like, it doesn't make sense what you're telling me. I'm like, I just kept going back. We're going to sell this. These are the numbers. I said, it doesn't work. The numbers don't work. And I finally said, I want to sell the whole thing, one package, to another buyer. They come in and they buy it as it is. That was in August of 2007. Again, everybody knows about the world financial crisis in 2008 that we didn't really see coming, right? So everybody was still very optimistic about the golf resort, real estate, and all of that. And I'm looking at it from the inside saying, we need to sell this. And so, God decided at that point, it was not my time to lose everything I had worked for. And so the same realtor that sold it to us got a group in from Portugal. They came in, they owned several golf courses overseas. They wanted to make this their platform acquisition in the United States. They came in, we met them in September. We finished due diligence, and we closed and sold it till December 21st.
Wow.
And we were out. Everybody got their money back. Everybody made money. We actually held on to a parcel of land that was adjacent to it in case they were successful, because we believed, hey, they can run with this thing. It sounds good. And then 2008 came, and the bottom fell out. So if we held on to it, we would have been wiped out. But we worked hard. We really did our analysis, but we got really lucky.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that you're leaving out of that story, as wonderful as it was, because I lived through this with you, as a friend, and watched your hair's gray a little bit. And
I had a full head of hair right up to that point. That's when it started to go downhill really fast.
Yeah, I mean, I commend you for holding on to your sanity and staying very focused, because and I heard a lot of the stories as they were happening. You were the rock that literally just kept moving forward. And it had to do with numbers. It had to do with your creativity, and it had to do with making, something that was potentially going to be ugly, something that could be a win. And you could have gotten greedy and tried to hold out for a lot more, and you would have lost. And you could have held on to the golf course thinking in another couple of years, we're going to blow this thing up, and you would have lost. So staying level-headed really is rare in business. So I commend you for that one.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add to that is that, it is never me, because there's a reason people say, why do you have partners in every business? I said, one, because I believe in synergy. And, and the other is it's more fun. Now, if you don't have the right partners, it becomes unfun for a period of time. But there were four of us that brought that thing forward together, and every single person was as valuable as the next to get that thing out and to where it needed to be, that somebody was willing to buy it. And for that, it just made my conviction in having partners in business and the value that comes out of that even stronger.
Hey, how do you handle partnerships in a way that keeps the synergy, to use a word that you were talking about? Because there are a lot of partnerships out there that start very, very well with great, meaningful intentions, and then something happens. Or there's a lot of partnerships where they just don't have the person who's going to be the glue, which you were in that one. I know some of your other business partnerships, you were both, very, very strong and glued together the entire time. There's a wonder in the businesses that I have that have partnerships. And I'm just so grateful for these people. Like, the great majority of our partnerships ever have always been so fruitful, not just from a financial standpoint, but from a feeling of, wow, we're building something together, and we're building it so much better and smoother because we're together. And I've got businesses where we don't have partnerships, right? And I would never want a partnership in those businesses. So tell me what your formula is, or what your idea is for holding partnerships strong.
It's a really good question. I mean, I think it started for me when I was financial consulting, and I got to see a lot of business owners that had partners, and, we would do a lot of estate planning and business continuity planning, and you have to do what if scenario. What if you died tomorrow? What would happen here? What about your partner? What about the kids in the business, kids not in the business? It took me into a lot of deep scenarios that were complicated. So when we, as I've had other partnerships, I think most of them have started out as friends, and then it blew from there, which has its difficulties. But what I got to see in most of those businesses while I was financial consulting is that if you had a lot of times they had an inside guy and an outside guy, right? So they had a guy who was operations and a guy who was sales. So when you grow up in the financial consulting business, it's sales, and you have to be really good at, when I developed skills of consultative selling, when that was the new thing. And it was good because there was no closing. It was all really truly about trying to find out what problems people had and how we could solve them. And that also led me to looking in my evaluation for businesses is, how big a problem are we going to solve with this, right? On-site mobile paper shredding. I knew it was a big problem because I was in the financial consulting business, taking pieces of paper, ripping them in half and throwing them into a garbage can, going, anybody can read that. So there's kind of there was some things that were related as far as my conviction and the need for the service problem we were solving. And then because my good friend, who we knew since we were 13, was also in financial consulting, we both saw it through the same lens. And we're like, that's a big problem, and it's not hitting anybody's radar yet. And we knew it because we were violating the very, issues that, client privacy. So it was really more of, as to answer your question, as it relates to the partnerships as they developed and the businesses grew. It's funny, I would say it this way. When things are bad, there's a greater propensity for you to have disagreements when you're hitting challenges, but there's also an opportunity to bond, because you're like, this is really bad. Like, what the fuck? And can I swear?
What's that?
I just swore. Can I swear?
You can absolutely swear.
I'll go back.
I fucking swear all the time on this.
But there's the things that are going bad. There's a propensity for you to you start to get on each other, and you're not having agreement. At the same time, that same challenge will bind you as you get through it. When things are going really well, if you have the right partner, it's nothing but a celebration, because you're just high-fiving, being excited, and it's great, right? And so, there's always a challenge, though. It's a relationship. And there is not a relationship on this planet that doesn't have some degree of friction. And it's really, I think, most of the businesses, if I go back and think about it, like, I can sell, and most of my partners can sell. So if you're not an inside guy and you have the ability to sell, even if you become that inside guy, there's still a connection between your partner because there's not a guy out there driving the business thinking, well, this business wouldn't be anything without me. Right? If I wasn't selling, and the operations guy saying, well, it wouldn't be anything without me if I wasn't keeping our customers happy, and they can't see it. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges as far as partnerships go from what I have seen. But fortunately, in my businesses, and I have to go through all of them in my head, the majority of them, there's been two of us that have been able to sell. And because of my experience operationally, I'm able to get the operations kind of in a really good spot so we can continue to focus on selling. And that's what this business is right now. We just hired another person's coming on in another month or so. And that's all I need to finish getting the operations in a good spot. And I can tell you when my business partner and I are on the road, which we just got back from Vegas last week, and it was so exciting, a lot of good opportunities. When you're living in that growth, you're just growing it, and you have a team that can then handle it. That's like the most exciting part. So even if I'm not there in a business, we start painting the picture about getting there. And I think that keeps that synergy alive, and you extract the maximum value out of it.
Yeah. So you would say the number one, if I were to sum it up, correct me if I'm wrong, you would say the number one thing to keep a partnership healthy is to both work on similar projects together so that you're pushing the ball up the hill the same way. So in the example that you gave, you're both selling. So you know how important it is when he's selling, and he knows how important it is when you are, but you also have core competencies in other areas of the business. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say that's important. In our partnerships, the most important thing, I think, and I really would have to think about this because there's so many, it's such a delicate area that there's a lot of levers that need to be pulled. But I think that I'll use an easy word and then I'll use a business word. I think communication is super important. Regular communication. The business word is meetings. Like the more time I spend with partners in the businesses that I partners with, the more we're tight and working together on everything. The less time we spend together, the more time between our meetings, it seems like the less synergy there is. There's a little less connection we have.
Yeah, I agree. And I always say it's easy to villainize somebody from afar. So if somebody's not working in your office every day and they're somewhere else or in the field or whatever, and there's issues and you're like, well, what's going on with that? And you become critical, and it's crazy how it happens. But when you all of a sudden get that communication going, just like you're talking about, and you get the full story or the full perspective, or there's some one little fact that was left out from something else, and you're like, So I think another thing that comes out of this is you keep giving your, trust the decision that you made with the partner to get into at the beginning, and always give each other the benefit of the doubt. And as I'm saying that now, I need to do more of that right now. So I'm giving myself a lesson in remembering that. But in all seriousness, it goes a long way, and I've learned, and one of my latest things which contributes to the partnerships is I'm really focused on becoming more and more mellow in my day-to-day interactions. And a lot of that's coming from my faith, and that I'm trusting that, I think God's doing it to me, because I pray for more faith, and then he keeps giving me stuff that I have to go, well, that's not good. And then I have to think about it, and I'm pausing more, thinking about it, and then I'm just trusting, and all of that is helping me to be a better partner, better father, better husband, all of it. As it relates to business, partnerships can be tricky, and I'm finding now that I'm at this stage in my life that is very aware of it, and it's the next phase of my development, and it's really cool.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that I've always admired about you is your persistent pursuit of personal growth. You've always been somebody who's sought out people who have achieved what you want to achieve. You've always been the kind of person who goes to very high-end strategic events, not like the mass seminars where there's, just thousands of people and you're getting rah-rahed up, but the real ones where you're sitting down with mountain movers and bonding with them. You're very good with surrounding yourself with people who can help pull you up. And that has progressed into, and I don't know when this started, when you got very faithful and really started relying more on God and your faith. But I saw it come out in you maybe 4 or 5 years ago in a much bigger way, a more open way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been, been religious. I went to Catholic school. We always went to church with the family and all of that. And but I think what it is that God wants you to share His word with other people. And I think I'll tell you exactly when it happened for me, where I became more open about it. It was a bunch of years ago, probably about that time you're saying, 4 or 5 years ago. I went to one of these events, and it was a boot camp type thing. I was at a difficult spot, actually maybe longer ago than that. But and it was a fantastic event. And there was a group of guys, there were like 10 of us, and we went out to a restaurant. And one of the guys, we were about to eat, and he says, "Let's pray." And we all hold hands, all a bunch of guys holding hands in a restaurant, and we pray. And that really hit me, because I was like, I need to be more of speak, not embarrassed in any circumstance to speak about my faith or to pray or to be grateful. And I remember that to this day, and it changed everything about how I did. So in our home, we pray over every meal. And it's, I was in Nashville with my wife, and I saw this sign, not a sign, but an actual sign, that was a physical sign. And it said, "God bless us through the forest, the family beside us, and the love between us." And I was like, I love that. I immediately bought it, shipped it home. It's in my dining room on the wall. And that's the prayer that we say over every meal. And I'll always say something in advance of that. But my point is, when we go to restaurants, and I'm still a little weird about it if I'm with a group of people that and I'm really conscious trying to get better at that. But with our family, it doesn't matter where we are, we do it. And I don't have a single thought about it, because I feel like God also wants me to be a leader of my family, to bring them to Him, introduce Him to them. And so I'm focused on that, and my job as a father and a husband in that area. But we'll do it in restaurants and all that. But I think He keeps testing me. He puts me in other situations, but sometimes I'll forget if I'm with a group of people that I'm not that close to or whatever. But then when I don't forget, I think He's like, "Oh, how about now?" And I'll be like, and a couple of times I've been like, "You mind if we say a prayer?" And no one's ever been insulted or anything. So I don't know why I still think, and then sometimes don't do. But as maybe silly as that sounds, or as small as that sounds, I think it's an example of me developing in that area. And the big switch was me being able to be more vocal about it and talk about it under circumstance, because I'm proud of it, but not in a way for anything else, that I know this is one of the reasons that I love this plan.
Do you bring any of that into your business?
No. Now that we talked about this, I think I probably will. I think it's a little, I have no answer.
Okay. That's a
question.
It was just a question. I will make a statement though with this. Again, we've known each other for a bit of time. I've seen you in your heyday. I've seen you at your lowest. I have never seen you at more peace and happy since you've been more open about your faith. Yeah, it's a marked difference. It's a marked difference. And if we weren't, recording in public now, I would make fun of you for a whole bunch of other crap that that was old Bob.
Yeah, we all know about old Bob. But no, listen, we're all on a journey, and I've always been on a personal development journey and all that, as you know. And but this one's different. This isn't about me. I don't really feel like I'm responsible for it. I just kind of opened my heart up to all of this. And what you're seeing is really probably what God intended me to be. He's like, "Hey, this is what you're supposed to be." When I was a baby, and He said, "Go do it." And then we screw it all up along the way. So maybe I'm starting to move in that direction of what He really wants me to be. It really comes down to just, it's a reminder of faith every moment, every day. As soon as you start to get fearful, He doesn't want that. And I catch myself, and when you're an entrepreneur and you're in business, there's stuff that happens every freaking day that you're like, "Oh boy, what's that? Hope that's not too big an issue. How big is the issue is it?" You're problem solving all day long. And one of my business philosophies is let's make a whole bunch of little mistakes, just don't make any big ones, right? And when you have employees and you start to delegate out responsibilities, now you're expanding the opportunity for mistakes to be made, which then comes back to what you were talking about earlier, having good processes and procedures so that they know what to do and they can succeed. And the number of mistakes they could make goes down and the severity of any of those mistakes is small. So, it's all really tied together. But as a leader, you just want to be the best you can be, right? So in addition to the personal development, this other part of it, I think is, listen, there's got to be some advantage to getting old, because if you didn't have an advantage of this and things are just falling apart on you, it would suck.
Well, one of the things that you and I have talked about many times in the past is you have a set of uncompromising values, and you use that phrase often. I don't know this for a fact, but I think that's something that is all encompassing in Bob's life as well as your businesses. So take us down that rabbit hole and talk about values that you believe scale companies and keep growth sustainable.
Well, the uncompromising values thing really originates from like a family level first. And, you have children, I have 3, that raised since they were little. Obviously, they're my kids.
Oh, you have 4 kids. Did you?
So, now that I'm remarried, I have 4 children. And so, but as they were young and you're trying to figure out like how you manage them, and raise them as good kids, it was, it started out, please and thank you. Got to have your manners, right? And the funny story about that and how these things develop and why I call them uncompromising values, because I feel very strongly about it, is that my mother was big on that. My mom passed away 6 months before my daughter, because my oldest was born. And, but she was beloved. Family, friends, everybody, our house was the place. They would go there to see Rose, not necessarily us. And so it just made you feel like amazing when you're in her presence. And so, but I was like 19 years old. I remember it. And like one of my aunts gave me like a card, and within like 3 seconds, she's like, "What do you say?" And I'm like, "Mom, I'm like 18. Give me a second to say thank you," and that became a joke. But she was big on it, drilled it into the point. So I did that with my kids. And so please and thank you is one of our uncompromising values. One of the other ones is I tell my kids, there are just 2 things that you need to do all the time. This is not a compromise. And it's to be respectful and grateful, because I believe everything else falls underneath that. And if you stop at one of my kids and say, what are the 2 most important things? They'll tell that you need to be this, and respectful and grateful. They'll just tell. And so are they always respectful and grateful? They're not. Now they're older, but were they all along? They weren't. So I've carried that into my business. And it's funny because if you send emails, and my CPA does this too, and we've never talked about it, but I'll send something to him and I'll be like, okay. And I'll send it to him and he'll be like, thank you. And I'll just thank you back. And a lot of people, you can justify skipping over that in emails in business for sure. But it's always that closing manner that I incorporated in everything. Great, thanks. That's one of my things to close out a conversation. And I'm really just kind of thinking about that now. But there's an opportunity, and I'm harping on these particular uncompromising values because they're so foundational for me. But there's an opportunity to provide those courtesies in normal business all the time. And I find it's much easier to do an email. Someone text, I'm going to be more conscious of it now because I want to see if I do it in text too. Just even with my people. People will walk in, they don't walk out of here. If they give me something, thank you. But you're welcome, whatever that is. And it just takes a lot of pressure off because it puts you at a place almost of an implied gratitude. And you don't even realize that it's happening for even the smallest things. So you can tell I really love that as far as uncompromising values, as far as the human part of our world. Business, Fisher Price, it is a big uncompromising value. And, it's really an uncompromising value because I don't like people compromising or complicating things. And so when things start to get too complicated, and I did it this morning in my morning meeting, as I said, look, we are not putting probes on Mars and we are not curing cancer yet. And then everybody's like, oh, we reset. And I'm like, we are taking yarn and making it into fabric into rolls and we're delivering it somewhere. That's all we do. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they start to reset. I'm saying now, because going back to all the different businesses I've had, what we sell or what we make, this is the first product business I've had. Every other business has been a service business. And, but what you sell or, it doesn't matter. That's another reason I've got this disease of entrepreneurial ADD. Because it doesn't matter what I sell, because I believe if we're solving a big enough problem and that service or product solves that problem, we'll sell it. Like, we'll be able to sell it. And if you have enough margin in it, you'll make a lot of money and everything else can take care of itself. So keep that thing simple. So that's sort of along the same Fisher Price, but one of my techniques to bring everybody back down to reality when they start to think we're doing the most important thing on the planet or what we do is so complicated is to keep their perspective that way.
Yeah, I got to go back and I have to say something about your say please and thank you, because I think it's so profound. And I think that this is one of those things that's so simple that people will forget how powerful it is and they'll brush right by it, which is a big, big, big mistake in business. I have had the good fortune of traveling around the globe dozens and dozens and dozens of times speaking on stages in countries where I didn't even speak the language, where we had interpreters. Sometimes while I was on stage, somebody would be there interpreting, what I'm saying in their language often. And people ask me to this day, how did you like this country? How did you like that country? How did you like the people in this country? Every single time I'm like, I love the people. Like in every country I've been to, I have stories about how great the people were to me. And maybe my assistant had something to do with that. I'm almost guarantee you she did. Emily, prior to any one of my trips, would prepare a one-page document for me. On the top of the one-page document was, how do I say please? How do I say thank you? How do I ask for a bathroom in their language? Because I always, always, always wanted to show them respect. And please and thank you is massively huge in every single culture.
I love that.
That got me treated amazingly well. Whereas I traveled with other people sometimes, other business people, other speakers, and they come back and they tell stories now about, I didn't really like this place. And the people there were, standoffish or whatever. Like I didn't have any of that experience. I only had good experiences. So grateful. Not always great experiences with airlines. Some of those were a little bit shady, but the people were always great.
It's universal, and I think it's overlooked. People get lazy with it. I'll give you one other uncompromising value, and it comes from my dad when I was little. My dad passed away when I was 13. So any lesson that kind of stuck with me from him or conversation, you had to know how to be pretty powerful, because he was talking to a kid that was from 0 to 13, right? And that was it. So I have a whole big thing here about, like, if there's a problem, like, we're going to find a way. There's a solution. We just have to figure it out. And I get like really hyper-focused and trying to figure out, okay, how big is the problem? Okay, how do we resolve it? How quick can we resolve it? I'm just trying to, we have all that. And just like, I go into this thing. And so we were, my dad was into trains. They had all these different hobbies that he had, but he really liked Thomas Edison a lot. He took me to the Thomas Edison Museum, here in New Jersey. I was young. I did it for a project at school. I was probably, 8 years old, 10 or something like that. And he has a saying, Thomas Edison has a saying, and so there's a better way to do it, find it. And my father would take that thing and he would make these signs out of wood, and he would like burn the wood around the edges, and then he would like take the sign and burn that around the whole thing and then blow it out and then glue it to the sign. It was like a thing he did. And he would find things he liked and give them out as gifts to people. So that one, so it's carried in like there's a better way to do it, find it. So that's kind of in me, probably from that. So the story that came up, which really helped my shredding business, and it helped, it's been for everything, was with those, and I'll keep it short, but those trucks, so we had these massive shredders on them, and the trucks were complicated. They dumped the shredders, they had a hydraulics system on it, a PTO system that would switch the diesel engine over to run the shredder. It was a thing. And so if one of them went down, you couldn't go up to Ryder Truck Rentals and get one. So it was a big deal. You had customers to service, and we had 20 trucks ultimately, but in the beginning, we didn't have as many. It became a bigger deal if trucks went down. And so I'd go to the mechanic and I'd be like, okay, look, here's the truck. And introduce in the truck. I'd be like, we can't get another. I'd explain what I just explained to you. I'd be, so if I get this thing in here, I just need you to diagnose it like the second I bring it in, because if there's a part that we need that you don't have, I said, we need to order it right away so that it'll be down the least amount of time. And that was my speech for all these guys. So ultimately, as we got bigger and I had guys running our fleet, they would be like, I'm like, why is that truck down? Like, oh, we can't get the part. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I would say to them, there's a part sitting on a shelf somewhere in the country in a warehouse with a guy standing down, not too far from it. And all you got to do is find that guy, get him to walk down, get that part, put it in a box, and overnight it goes. So if it's close enough, drive to it. And they'd be like, he's out of his mind, right? And so this went on for like a long time. And we had a new truck that came in, Cummins, who made the engines. It was a brand new engine. When I came to find it was in the shop, and it was taking really long. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And they had a new engine, and they were having the diesel mechanics test something and then wait and then do it again. So we were basically in this test thing going on with that. When I found out I lost my stuff, I ended up like calling like the president of Cummins or so. I don't know exactly what I did, but they ended up overnighting a brand new diesel engine to the shop. And they had it the next day, and they switched out the engines, and that was the thing. And I'm like, oh my God. First of all, I never expected that. But secondly, those guys had nothing to say to me ever again about the ability to get a part, because I had a whole engine blown it, right? So I think the mentality is that, listen, that is a unicorn situation, but out of that came the lesson is that we went ahead and we started to stock all these important parts in our warehouse and spent, tens of thousands of dollars to do that to solve the problem, because I was trying to not deal with it. But that extreme thing made everybody a believer. And I think it's just really a standpoint of really a lot more can get done than you believe. So all of that came from that sign that my dad made that gave me when I was probably 10 years old. And like, not only because I remember the saying, I can see it in my mind.
It's amazing how little things stick with us and make such profound differences, which, listen, that's a great segue to this. Little things that we do make a profound difference in other people's lives. Little things that people have done around us made a profound difference. And some of those things made us successful. Like something that somebody might have said to me at a particular point in my life had that butterfly effect and made something better. And then it turned me into who I am today. I attribute a lot of my success to my father, who was not an entrepreneur at all, but the most patient man that I've ever met in my life. He, to this day, he's my favorite human. He's an amazing person. So the reason why I'm saying this is because your two sons have watched you from the day they were born, and they used that persistence and consistency and all the other values that you instilled in them to become great at hockey. And then, I don't know, a switch flipped. Like, I didn't hear about it until all of a sudden you came and you said, hey, my sons are starting this business. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What kind of business is it? And you're like, it's a power washing business. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever, right? Our kids start businesses. Great. They have become so successful. It's shocking the amount of success that they've had in the few years that they've been in business. And I think, what are their ages? 21 and 22 or something like that?
Yeah, 20 and 22.
20 and 22. And they're so good. And they literally, they're like that kid who, doesn't realize they can't do it. And because they've watched you all the time, persist. And they know what to look for. And then they've used you as a mentor, bringing things to you and saying, hey, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? Their business is absolutely amazing. I know adults in their 40s, 50s, 60s that don't have businesses that run as smoothly and have grown as much as their business. So, let's just talk about that for a minute, because that's pretty freaking crazy.
Yeah, no, I didn't know you were going to bring this one up, but I'm obviously very proud of them. I can tell you I have zero contribution or responsibility for their success in hockey. That was on them. but I did drive them around and I did give them conversations, and that's about it. I can't even skate, and they make fun of me for that.
Yeah. So
all the time.
listen, let's stop there. I understand you're friggin' humble. I get it. But you and I have also had conversations where you're telling me, hey, I'd love to have this conversation with you, but I got to go. I'm in the middle of dropping my boys off for hockey, or I'm this or I'm that. Like, you told me about some of the things you talked to them in the car about. I've been on the phone after the practices sometimes when you're in the car talking to these guys at the same time. So I understand you're humble about this, but leading by example, like you've made I'm not going to step on this. You made it.
I appreciate that. And any hockey parent will tell you that it's expensive. It takes an incredible amount of time, but it's a gift to have that much time in the car with your kids. So yes, we've had lots of conversations. We had more time together and more conversations because of hockey than we ever would have ever had. So it was worth every dime. But thank you for saying that. And then, as far as their business goes, I think hockey really did have a lot to do with how they're embracing having employees now. And because they have this team mentality and they've been led by coaches, they've been captains on different teams that they've been on. So that experience, and they've gamified it. They have like a wheel they spin in the shop, and the guys get to get a prize if they've gotten so many, 5-star reviews or different things. And I didn't teach any of that, right? So it's something about either their generation and combined with their experiences. Just, every day I'm running 2 companies now, this one, and I shouldn't say that. I spend time in 2 companies. There's this one, because I get home, like, we need a meeting, and they can meet at 8:00 at night. And I'm like, oh, really get ready to start winding down. And they're like, let's go, and so their enthusiasm is fantastic. And the best thing I think that they have going for them is they are sponges, and they're really smart, and they listen and they execute, and there's like nothing nothing grows underneath their feet. And we were fortunate enough to have them in an unprecedented, be involved with our group and get your guys' input as well, which I think when they get to hear perspective from other entrepreneurs that aren't their dad, and they suck me dry. They're like, what about this? What about that? And I'll give them a few things. What about this, that? And they run. But when they got to hear it from you guys and the other perspectives, and then, a couple of you guys pointed out, well, Chris is really good at this, or your dad's really good at this. All of a sudden they got to see that even though you got a bunch of guys who have had some success, you still have different strengths. Like you pointed out earlier in this conversation, you have different strengths that you just are really good at. And as we, with our own group, we'll go to each other for certain things. If I need this, I'm calling Chris or Kurt, or whoever else it may be. And it's such a great asset. And they got that gift of that with you guys, but living it every day with them is great. And they are, they're crushing it. And, I fully expect they're going to, with all the perspective that all of us, you guys have given them, I think they're just on a mission. So yeah, it's fun and it's very rewarding to see that happen.
Yeah, I think as entrepreneurs, we look at these things and we say, we want to grow, we want to grow, we want to grow. And then there comes a point where we want to help others grow. And then we hope, we got our fingers crossed that maybe one of those people is one of our kids or one of our close friends that we could just give back a little bit to and help them excel. Your kids are just, your daughter's amazing also, but your 2 boys in business it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch. And the lesson that I take from this personally is, as much as you and I like to believe probably that we've matured and we understand how to do things, we're so sophisticated about moving these puzzle pieces around, these chess pieces around, and growing these things. Neither one of us has the drive that we used to. Like, we have to be strategic. We've got to know the puzzle pieces to move, because, come whatever, 4:00, 5:00, 6:00 at night, we're done. We turn off, and we want to spend time with our family. We want to spend time with friends. We want to recharge. Whereas when I started, I would go all night sometimes and with a tremendous amount of energy. And then the next day, after like 2 or 3 hours of sleep, I'd still be highly caffeinated. I'd be like, yeah, let's go. We're going to do something else. And that's what I see in them. So I'm literally relearning from watching them how to like get excited instead of just be strategic.
Yeah. I love that you just said that. It's so funny because I like had similar thoughts, not the way you articulated it, but it just completely clarified it for me from what you just said, is that like they are just, it's hilarious watching them and how excited they are, all that stuff. And I just had the thought, I'm like, I got to bring some of that back into my business because they're fun to be around. And it's also fun to see what they don't know. And they're like, well, what about this? Like, what's this or what's that? And I'm like, how did that not get explained to them along this way? And then once they know it, you watch the little light bulb go on and then a piece kind of connects and then they go again, right? So you watch the whole thing getting built. And it's really inspiring. It's like, it's as inspiring for me to be a part of it with them. Because I know they're getting so much value. I mean, they talk like young entrepreneurs. I mean, there's not a business class in school that I ever heard them come out of and cause them to talk like this. And so I'm incredibly grateful for it. And, if they can, like you said earlier, like, how did you get into, mobile paper shredding? It wasn't like I thought at some point I could only get into that mobile paper shredding business or that sleep center. It's like, you don't know. And they did say, I want to be a power washer. They just tried something, liked it. The financial remuneration was there. All those basic formula things or ingredients that I spoke about early on, I watched that kind of come together for them. And just like in hockey, I never pushed them. They played at a high level. I said, look, as long as you drive this and you're up in the morning and doing all the things you got to do on your own, I'll drive you where you need to go. Well, as long as you're driving your love for this, I'll support it. And it's funny because I was never going to tell them to do this or to keep doing it. And they've been driving it on their own. You can watch the enthusiasm carry them and all that stuff. And so I think for any level of entrepreneur, regardless of where you at, if you have the blessing, it doesn't have to be your own kids, to go and get around that environment with some young entrepreneurs, it is electric. And
it's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. My son is about a year behind where you boys are as far as business goes, and started his own company. And we meet at least once a week and we go through things. And and in between those, he's texting me, he's emailing me, he's showing me, I mean, and again, this relates to all entrepreneurs, you and I included, where I think sometimes we have to plug into the younger generation in order to remember the energy and the electric that really grows things. Within a couple of days, he put together a website, beautiful, amazing freaking website. Whereas most companies, in order to pivot and upgrade their website, takes them weeks, months, sometimes a year. He puts together a PowerPoint that is a amazing professional PowerPoint. He comes out. I said, hey, you know what would be great? We were sitting out back one day and he wanted to have a business meeting. He wanted to smoke some cigars. And I'm like, well, I could do that. I haven't done that for a long time. I could do that. So we got some cigars. We sat out back. We were smoking them. And I said, what would be interesting? Such a great business. But you're going into B2C. You're going into selling to executives. I think you should have a white paper. I've never seen a white paper in this particular industry. I think you should have a white paper. Bob, I kid you not, a day and a half later, he's got a white paper. Was probably 70% good. Like it needed tweaking. I go through, I tweak a little bit, but I didn't have time to finish the tweaks. He looks through it, figures out the systems that I'm going through, my mindset, interviews me, finishes it. And then it's texting me the next day saying, I uploaded it to my website. What do you think the next step is? I'm like, I don't know that I could keep up.
Well, and your son is a chip off the old block. I think it's the takeaway for any entrepreneur is, you can only give back. There's plenty of opportunities to do that with kids. I just happen to have it in my home, but it is, you get as much out of it as you get. I think you see that too.
Without a doubt. Bob, buddy, it's been amazing having you here. Thank you so much for sharing your war stories. Thank you for sharing your successes. Thank you so much.
This has been fun. When we were discussing doing it, I already knew I was going to have a good time. So thank you for including me in this.